So we are here tonight at McAuliffe International School, where a good number of the students are going to go on to East High, where last month a 16-year-old named Luis Garcia was shot to death outside of school. Luis had written a poem titled "My City." He wrote, "It's not what it seems to be. It's not just hanging out with friends going downtown. It's getting shot because you were at the wrong place, wrong time." So certainly Denver's young people know the danger to their own lives, and one of you is going to be in a unique position to help as mayor. Terrence Roberts, you rose to prominence in Denver as a former gang member who did time, then came back to the community as an anti-violence activist. You recently told me that the gang just happened to be the negative peer influence or peer group that you were around when you were growing up, and that a negative peer group could be a football team or a sorority or a fraternity. I think people understand what you're saying about different kids having different upbringings, but does that diminish what's going on with gangs in Denver when you say stuff like that?
No, definitely not. Most people that are in gangs are not, all studies have been showing this for decades. Most people that are in gangs, it's for a community versus they want to go rob little old ladies and do violence to people. Most members of gangs are not violent people. It's actually a smaller percentage of people that are committing the actual violent crimes that are a part of those communities. It is a community. If a 12-year-old child has nothing to do after school, but a 38-year-old man or woman does in Lodo or somewhere else, that's a problem in this city. We don't have enough after-school programs. If the Crips or the Bloods are cooler and tougher than your after-school program, guess what your son's probably gonna be if they don't have anything to do? Guess who your daughter's gonna be thinking is cool to date? Somebody who's probably a damaged child who needs services themselves. So no, it doesn't diminish saying that, because there are negative peer groups besides gangs. We just dump everything onto these youth, and it's not fair to them.
Thank you. Andy Rougeau, apart from your pledge to hire more Denver police officers, which you've talked about tonight, and the majority of candidates on the stage, by the way, have said that they want to hire more Denver police officers, what else will you do to keep Denver's young people safe from violence?
So Denver's young people right now are not safe. There was a father and a daughter driving home down I-25 South. They're coming back from a volleyball practice. Normal time of night, and the dad looks in his rearview mirror and he sees two cars zooming way over the speed limit. Driver's side window, front windshield shattered into glass. It was street racers shooting at each other right by Mile High Stadium on I-25. We had multiple people killed by street racers last year. And the reason why we're having this rise in violence is, one, a lack of police officers. That's why we need to have those 400 police officers. It's a lack of funding for our police, for police training. It's also a 911 system that's broken. Because right now, if you call 911, there's a 25% chance you'll sit on hold for more than 30 seconds. On one of those worst moments in your life, you will sit there and hear that dial tone ring and ring. So that's why Denver deserves a mayor who will fight for a future, who will actually add 400 police officers, not subtract them, who will increase funding for police and make sure our 911 system works.
Thank you.
Lisa Calderon, you have been very clear that when it comes to public safety, you don't think more police means more public safety, but that community safety initiatives can really help. So what role do Denver police and the city play in addressing youth violence?
Right. It's not just my belief. It's actually supported by research that more police doesn't necessarily equate to more safety. What does are things that, like housing. When we know people are housed, they can be stabilized and we can find them. I've trained law enforcement for 20 years. Around domestic violence, and then also working for 8 years in a jail. And what I hear from them is they do not want to be sweeping people. They want to be solving crimes. They want to do the jobs that they were hired to do. So what we need to do actually is reinvest from having officers sweep people to actually having crisis intervention responders working around people with their trauma. That would leave police officers free to solve crimes rather than pick on unhoused and poor people.
So you were chief of staff to City Councilwoman Candy Siribaca when she proposed abolishing the Denver Police Department and replacing it with a peace force. Yes or no, do you support that idea? No, and I didn't know it was coming up, actually, but I support the idea of transforming our public safety system. So that I do support. I was part of the Reimagining Policing task force where we made 112 recommendations of how to transform policing. So, I support the idea, the idea that she was working toward for a peace force, meaning that we should not have to use violent policing to go after protesters and pay $14 million in a settlement, for example. So we start with the goal that we want and we work backwards.
That data is wrong, because more police do lead to more safety.
It is not wrong, Andy.
We saw from
actually,
President Obama.
You probably need to do more research
let me tell you
than
about some
making blanket statements
Okay, hold on.
and trying to always talk over people.
And ask the folks in the audience to hold on.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Nobody can hear either of you when you talk over each other or when people clap. So what we're going to do is, if you'd like to take 15 seconds to make your point, and then you can respond.
So President Obama had a stimulus in 2009, increased funding for police. Academic studies show that decreased violence per additional police officer by 5 less violent crimes and 11 less property crimes per year. That's a clear example of more police making the city safer.
So look up Vera Institute, look up Sentencing Project, look up many other studies that show that, and particularly for communities of color, which I know you are less familiar with, more policing does not equal more safety. And so for us, we have to look at other issues like, again, the social safety net, like affordable housing, like good jobs and unionized jobs. Those are things that bring down the crime rate. So again, you don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, thank you. Trinidad Rodriguez.
Can I just moderate this debate a little bit?
You may not, but you're welcome to share your views about
and here's the way this is the way we come to agreement. I heard what Dr. Calderon said, which is additional police does not necessarily mean more safety. That is not in opposition to what Andy just described, which was specific data, which I agree with. We can grow the ranks of our police force and do it the right way and build equity in policing by creating more prevention strategies and increasing training because our officers are stretched to the limit given the short staffing we have.
And we
so hold on just a quick second. We're going to come to Al on this.
Social workers.
But on this issue of police training, that is a contrast between several of you here. Anusha has a question about that.
Chris Hansen, you said you support more training and more accountability for law enforcement, as well as reinvesting in public safety. Lisa Calderon has said that Denver police are beyond the point of reform and training, and that public safety department needs to be restructured. So why do you think more training, an effort that is currently happening, will be changing how law enforcement operates?
Wow. I mean, to say that our police department is beyond reform or beyond fixing feels very defeatist to me. I'm certainly not there. I do think we need to have more investment in training, and I think some of the lawsuits that we've seen that the city's now paying out prove the point. And that's why I think it's such an important part of my public safety plan. But look, we're down several hundred officers in the police department. We're down almost 300 officers in the sheriff's office. And it is creating a HR crisis just on the ability for officers to be able to keep up with forced overtime. And that in and of itself is making us less safe because officers are worn out and morale is low. So we have to reinvest in our public safety department. I think it's the #1 job as your next mayor to do that. And that's why I'm in favor of getting back up to full strength. That's why I'm in favor of investing from day one when people enter the police academy and we're recruiting them. That's the sort of reinvestment that we need to make, and to make sure we don't have a repeat of some of the mistakes of the past. And that's how training can help us move forward.
Thank you.
I've heard a lot of the why on this topic. Most of you here tonight have said you want to hire more police officers in Denver. Kelly Brough, Debbie Ortega, Mike Johnston, Chris Hansen, Andy Rougeau, Trinidad Rodriguez, and Al Gardner have said that. Al Gardner, let's start with you here. You want stronger educational requirements for officers and a higher recruiting age beyond 21.
Yes, thank you.
As of this month, DPD is short 155 officers with 68 in the academy. I also checked with the Sheriff's Department, which is short 280 deputies with 16 in the academy. How, not the why, but how are you filling these vacancies with stricter educational requirements and raising the recruiting age?
Yeah, thank you. And as the only candidate on the stage is actively involved in hiring police, and I have a lot to say about that. And the first thing I will say is that it's quite easy to say we'll boost these numbers to 400, 600, whatever you want to throw out there. However, as we look at the pipeline of candidates that come through the Civil Service Office and the amount of intricate investigation that goes on in hiring these officers, it's not a quick turn and burn operation. And to answer the question how to change it, we simply put the screws around it to make those changes. As I'm looking at applications, as I'm looking at backgrounds, I'm less inclined to try and hurry up and boost the ranks as I am to make sure that we're getting the right person in the job. And if that means it takes us another 3 years, another 4 years to build our ranks, we need to make sure that we're doing it right, because the job of policing has indeed changed. And the policing now is not the policing that we had in the 20th or 19th century.
Thank you. So I name-checked a few of you. So Kelly Brough, 30 seconds, please. How are you filling hundreds of vacancies when this administration has not?
Yeah, I think what we have to focus on, I think the issue for sheriffs may be different than the issue for police. And I think we probably have to distinguish. They're recruited differently. There's different structures. I actually disagree with Al. I think we actually have to look at the Civil Service Commission process and ask the question if it's timely enough and speedy enough. But I think changing the culture in the police department and being really clear that it's more transparent and more open and people get a better sense of what's happening there, both to give feedback to that department and improve its performance, but I also think it will attract more candidates where people get a sense of what the job really looks like, because it has changed and it looks significantly different, and I would use that to recruit.
Thank you. Debbie Ortega, how are we increasing the staff?
So first of all, I want to get young people from our community into these job opportunities. These are good, livable wage jobs. And I want to use the cadet program to recruit young people. It pays 4 years of college for the young people who come into the cadet program, and they get preference points when they choose to apply. The career service, the civil service process doesn't always work. We have kids that go through the program and succeed alongside their peers, and we have seen some of our minority candidates that don't get hired on. So I think we need to look at the equity in the process to make sure that we're not creating disparities, but I want to have a workforce that reflects the diversity of our community. And then on the recruitment side for adults, we need to make sure that people from our police department who are doing the recruiting actually show up to these events to do the recruitment.
Can I clarify that, please?
Real quickly.
Because cadets do not get extra points for being a cadet. We sat with them about a month ago and went through that entirely. They are vetted the same way than any applicant is vetted. The city obviously pays for their education, and we appreciate it, but we do not give them preference points.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Mike Johnson.
Yeah, I think three things. One is changing the job. The two is changing the training, and the three is changing the recruitment. I think on changing the job, when you talk to retired officers who've done it for 20 years, and they'd say, the first 2 years of my experience I loved the most, because in those 2 years I actually was doing real community-based policing. I was out walking a beat, talking to neighbors, building relationships, giving them my card. That's the kind of job people love to have, which is the real call of being able to serve and protect. And so I think that changes the kind of applicants you require. That means you can actually recruit much more from communities where kids who might not have thought that an officer was a job they wanted to enter. Now it feels like a way you really can serve your community. And then you want to be able to, I agree with Debbie, get as much of a diverse pipeline as you can of folks who come from the communities they're going to be serving and supporting.
Thank you. Earlier, Chris Hansen, you explained why you wanted to hire more police officers. The question is, how are you going to actually do that?
Yeah, I think one of the other things that's missing here is obviously, we talked a little bit about tonight about diversifying the pipeline, looking at ways to get more applicants in. There's also the culture piece. I mean, the officers I talk to are feeling like morale in the department is extremely low. Certainly in the sheriff's office in particular, because of the extra shortages that they're up against right now. And so I think we need a mayor, and I will be a mayor who will celebrate great policing. Let's lift up our great policing. Let's lift up our officers and show the tight connection to the community and invest in that tight connection to the community. I think that's ultimately how we turn it around, because you think about the departments around Denver where people are leaving to. That is a big part of our attrition problem, and we have to be able to stop that. And I think one of the first things we have to do is change that culture that the department feels right now. And as the mayor, I want to celebrate and invest in great policing.
Andy Rougeau, 155 officers short right now, so that takes your math down to you need 555. And I guess if we're going to the max of 1,600, it's even shorter than that. So you've got a lot of officers to hire.
Yes.
How?
So when I talk to officers, similar to Chris, you don't hear it's a pay issue. You hear it's a morale issue. You hear it's a lack of support from the mayor. It's a belief they can't do their job. I talked to an officer who said he cannot pursue nonviolent crimes. The example was a car thief pulls up behind the car zooms off through a red light. That officer is understandably frustrated. He joined to serve. He joined to help his community. And he feels like he can't do it. He obviously gets yelled at by the person who just had the worst day of their life having their car stolen. So having a mayor who will fight for our future, support our officers, and properly fund them will let us meet that gap.
Thank you. And Trinidad Rodriguez, I named you also, so 30 seconds of how you're hiring more officers.
Improve the job, support good policing, staff my cabinet appointments, my director of public safety, with particular competency in growing teams and expanding teams.
Now, I want to go a little more in depth because you previously said that you also want to hire a form of security to forcibly hold people inside these involuntary detention facilities that you'll be building for up to 1,000 people experiencing homelessness. Where would you come up with these officers in addition to what you just mentioned about hiring for the city?
And the key resource here is clinicians to actually assess people's health conditions, their health stability, whether they're clinically diagnosable with substance and mental health use disorders. The second order is safety, and we can use. I'm actually very interested in working with our governor to explore the Colorado National Guard, and in particular because the U.S. military is right now innovating on mental health struggles among enlisted people. And so I believe we have an opportunity to build a best-in-class standard for how we actually care for people, keep everyone safe, and get them in, and support them into the kind of treatment that you actually need to be able to kick these incredibly difficult to kick mental health and substance use disorders, given the potency of the drugs that are on our streets today.
Thank you.
Wow, I just have to point out that I'm a little bit shocked that first we've gone from internment camps to now calling in the National Guard to forcibly remove people off the streets and put them.
And I didn't say any one of those words.
We've been talking about his internment camp.
In fairness, he didn't talk about the National Guard rounding people up, just guarding them once they're at the camp.
Very fair.
No, I know.
Thank you
so
very much.
I have a question also about police hiring for you. So after you passed police reform following George Floyd's murder in 2020, there were a number of reports of Colorado police officers leaving the job because they didn't want to comply with stricter requirements to report misbehavior by other officers, the potential for personal liability if they violate a citizen's civil rights. And to this day, conservative critics blame you personally for the difficulty in hiring police in Denver and around the state. Is this city going to have more trouble hiring and retaining law enforcement if you're the mayor?
I don't believe so. So I will start by saying, again, I am proud of the police accountability bill that we passed. And I'm sorry I left you out, Al. You were definitely there not only protesting but testifying. And thank you for bringing your expertise to the table. We can have the best and the brightest on our streets serving and protecting us, and we should demand it. We should demand it. We have seen officer shortages across the country. Colorado is no different, although we're the ones that have had accountability. And yes, there are some folks who left, specifically in some of our rural counties, that said, I don't want to be held to these standards. I don't want to have accountability. Step back. And I say that's probably the right thing for them, because if they don't want to be held accountable to the communities that they're serving, should they be there to protect and serve us? And so for me, I'm proud of the record that we have here in Colorado, and I know that we can have the best and brightest. But everyone deserves to live in a community that is safe. In fact, most recently, my colleague, Senator Rhonda Fields, just had a drive-by happen at her house, and her house was shot up. This is not the answer that we have to live with. Instead, we can make sure that we have the number of officers that we need with the mental health training, yes, that we need. But number one thing that I've heard from law enforcement is we need more investigators to get at the root causes of crime, to investigate and break up these rings that are happening across our city, targeting our young people to go into gangs and to commit violence. That's where we need to focus our resources. And quite frankly, that's what they've asked for.
Thank you. All of you on stage, with the exception of Thomas Wolfe, have said that Denver should maintain its unofficial status as a sanctuary city that does not cooperate with federal immigration agents. Thomas Wolfe, why should Denver resume cooperation with immigration agents?
So it was qualified by when it's a criminal investigation. I think this throws a very harsh light on a lot of federal policy, including what we do with the EPA here and how we deal with Suncor. We need, and of course I would frame it from a financial standpoint. With Suncor, if they're breaking the rules, we live in a society where it's cheaper to pay for forgiveness than it is to pay for permission. Until you make the behavior uneconomic, you're not going to get the change.
That was, I feel like you took a side turn somewhere.
A little bit of a side.
It's about why should you use city resources to help immigration agents?
To enforce the law. We need to start enforcing laws in this city. I would go back to encampments. They're the poster child of lawlessness. I'd like to ask the state folks on decriminalizing car theft, how that's helping police officers.
Thank you. Debbie Ortega, your public safety plan recycles a lot of what the Hancock administration is doing now. And when we asked you specifically what you would do differently, you said that you want Denver to have a metro area crime task force. So we counted up at least a half dozen task forces already. There's Raven, a metro task force on gun violence, CMAT, the task force on auto theft, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, there's the Colorado Organized Retail Crime Task Force, DPD has a task force on fentanyl, there's the Metro Gang Task Force, and there's the Safe Streets Task Force for violent offenders. Why is another task force the answer?
So I think it's pulling all of these together to make sure that we're working towards getting guns out of our streets, getting the lethal drugs that are killing our kids in our schools, as well as families. And I think, that's my focus. It's to address the crime element that's happening in our city it's undermining our entire community. The drugs that are on our streets are killing people. And I'm talking about the what used to be referred to as meth, which is now laced with chemicals that is causing severe mental illness among many of our people on our streets. So that's why those treatment beds become absolutely critical to helping those individuals stabilize their lives.
So, the state has a meth task force as well, which I didn't name. I'm trying to figure out, so you want to combine all the task forces into one mega task force, or help me understand that?
So I think it's pulling those resources together in a more comprehensive way, so we're having greater impact in addressing these issues.
Thank you.
And I want to mention, I was actually on the meth task force and when I worked in the Ritter administration. And what I will say is that we did not decrease meth use in the state. And it was pretty much a PR thing that happened with that task force. And so as we step back, and I am proud of the work that we did, not because we moved that forward, but because I learned when I was early in my career how to build bridges. So when we talk about police accountability, I want to be clear that law enforcement did not oppose the bill. In fact, they were neutral. Denver came to the table and worked on the bill with us. I think that's so important. But what Debbie is trying to say about needing to come in and use these task forces to hone in on what the criminology is that is happening right now that's affecting the majority of Denverites, that's not wrong. But we've got to make sure that those task forces are held accountable and that they provide real outcomes for people.
Thank you. Mike Johnston and Kelly Ruff, I'd like to bring you into this conversation and kind of turn it back to the idea of safety of students, the ones here at McAuliffe, East, elsewhere. There are some East High students who have asked for the return of Denver police officers as school resource officers, SROs. It's not their choice. It wouldn't be your choice as mayor either. It's up to the school board. It's up to the school district. Both of you have said that you want the mayor to be more vocal in getting involved in school board races. Even if you were successful in pushing progressive members off the school board, you're talking about years away in the future. So what could you do as mayor before the start of the next school year to keep DPS kids safe? Kelly Bruff first, please.
Yeah, well, I've already started. I've met with, I think, maybe every school board member today to talk with them about, does it really have to be a uniform policy that says no school can have a school resource officer, but why couldn't you make it the school's decision where the families and the students are deciding what they want? Because in my conversations throughout the city, I would say there are a number of schools who are begging for school resource officers. I also think it could be an additional way that you start to attract and recruit people who might want to be police officers someday.
Mike Johnston.
Yeah, I think there are three things we have to do here. One is you got to start with prevention. You got to make sure kids have access to more positive after school and summer school programming to keep kids from getting into violence in the front end. We have to do more early intervention. We got to make sure once we identify kids who have at risks of criminal activities, you're getting them deep support and wraparound services. And the third is, yes, I do think you need to be able to provide schools the safety that they want. I was a school principal. School principals and school communities should be able to make that decision. And so what I've said is I think the school board shouldn't take an ideological stand to deny parents or community members the ability to have safety if they are worried about their kids getting shot at schools. I think that's something that communities should be able to make. And I've said if the school board would not do that, I would work directly with DPD to try to deploy officers to those schools if the school board won't do that.
And you believe that the school board's position on this is ideological and not based on research on things like the school to prison pipeline?
I do. I worked for a superintendent who said, we'll let school principals choose. So I chose to put a social worker into my school instead of a school resource officer because that was the right decision for our community, our kids at that time. If I just had one of my students killed outside of my school, I would feel differently.
Thank you.